pleasure in opening the ordinary council meeting of the 25th of February at 6:30 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance. I wish to inform you that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The video will appear on the council website and YouTube channel. The public gallery will not be recorded unless accidentally, and only a participant in the meeting, that is, a person asking questions at public question time, will be live streamed and recorded. If you wish to ask a question at public question time, your voice and image will be recorded and live streamed. If you do not consent to your voice and image being recorded and live streamed to the public, then you may need to leave the meeting. By staying in the meeting, you consent to your voice and image being live streamed and recorded. No other electronic visual or audio recording device or instrument can be used to record the proceedings of this meeting without prior written permission from Council as outlined in the City of Belmont Standing Orders, Local Law 2017, Section 8.17. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I further acknowledge their cultural heritage, beliefs, connection and relationship with this land which continues today. Affirmation of civic duty and responsibility. Councillor Session, would you please read aloud the affirmation of civic duty and responsibility on behalf of elected members present?
Thanks, Mayor Rossi. I make this affirmation in good faith and declare that I will duly, faithfully, honestly and with integrity fulfil the duties of my office for all the people in the City of Belmont according to the best of my judgment and ability. I will observe the City's Code of Conduct and standing orders to ensure efficient, effective and orderly decision making within this forum.
Thank you, Councillor Sessions. We've received apologies from Councillor Powell. Leave of absence. I note there are no councillors recorded as having leave of absence for this meeting. Declarations of interest. Will the Coordinator of Governance please advise those declarations made to date? Are there any financial interests?
Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, we have received no declarations of financial interest for this evening.
Thank you. Are there any disclosure of interest affecting impartiality?
Yes, I have 3 disclosures of impartiality this evening. Firstly, from Councillor Sessions regarding item 14.2, the Wilson Park Precinct Public Art Commission. And although Councillor Sessions was not part of the evaluation meeting, the item did come before the Public Art Advisory Panel, of which she is the chair. Councillor Harris, item 12.1, the Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan. Councillor Harris submitted a comment to the public consultation for this item while he was not yet a member of the council. Councillor Kordzicki, also item 12.1, the Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan. Councillor Kordzicki is familiar with one individual who provided a response in attachment 12.1.9, the schedule of submissions for this item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Announcements. As mentioned at the ABF, congratulations to Councillor Phil Marks, Freeman of the City, on receiving the City of Belmont RSL 2025 Australian of the Year Award in recognition of his years of dedicated service to the community. Congratulations, Phil.
Well done.
Thank you. On another matter, in response to queries from the public regarding the requirement for a member of the public to be directly affected to make a submission or deputation at an agenda briefing forum, for the record, I will now provide the public with the guidelines used by the CEO and myself in assessing whether someone is directly affected as per the City's standing orders. When applying the standing orders to determine whether a person is directly affected by a matter or not, the factors to be considered by the CEO and myself as presiding member include the following: whether that person's interests are specifically adversely impacted by the matter. Does the decision affect the person's legal, financial or other substantial interests, such as those from being immediately adjacent a property, being an immediately adjacent property owner, in a way in which is material and specific when compared to the interest of others. If not, then the person is not directly affected. 2. Whether the person's rights or obligations are specifically altered by the matter. Does the matter impose, remove, or alter rights or obligations directly tied to the individual in a way which is material and specific when compared to the rights and obligations of others? If not, then the person is not directly affected. If there's a tangible and immediate connection between the decision and its effect on the person. If the impact of the decision is remote or only hypothetical, then the person is not directly affected. It's important to note that our standing orders are a local law, valid under the Local Government Act, approved by this council and gazetted by law. The standing orders must be applied, and the standing orders require a person or a group to explain how they're directly affected. The standing orders remain a valid law until any changes by the state government's reform process takes place, which we understand may be in October of this year. I apologise for the length of this explanation. However, taking a question on notice is not about avoiding the question. It often allows for a more thorough and considered response, as outlined in tonight's agenda under public question time, responses to questions taken on notice. Thank you. We now move to the disclaimer at 6:37 p.m. I wish to draw attention to the disclaimer notice contained within the agenda document and advise members of the public that any decisions made at the meeting tonight can be revoked pursuant to the Local Government Act of 1995. Therefore, members of the public should not rely on any decisions until formal notification in writing from the City has been received. 4.3. Declarations by members who have not given due consideration to all matters contained in the business papers presently before the meeting. Are there any declarations to be made by councillors? There are none. (5.1) Responses to questions taken on notice. Response to questions taken on notice from the ordinary council meeting of the 26th of November are noted in the agenda for Ms Hollands on behalf of Belmont Resident Ratepayer Action Group, for Ms Hollands herself, for Mr Cardoso himself, for Mr Cardoso on behalf of the Belmont East Ward Connect. Responses to questions taken on notice from the ordinary council meeting of the 10th of December of last year are noted in the agenda for Ms Hollands on behalf of Belmont Resident Ratepayers Action Group and Ms G. 5.2. Questions from members of the public. It is 6:38 p.m. and I open public question time and draw attention to the public gallery to the rules of public question time as written in the question time form. Under section 6.63 and 6.4 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2017, members of the public remind they must extend due courtesy and respect to both councillors and employees. Please do not use inappropriate, objectionable or untruthful expressions or expressions that reflect adversely on the character or actions of councillors or employees. If any expression is deemed inappropriate, you'll be directed to withdraw the expression and apologise. If you do not comply, I'll have to end your question. Lastly, remind and caution everyone present at this meeting to refrain from making defamatory statements, especially as the proceedings are now live streamed. Under section 6.2 of the City's Standing Orders, Local Law 2017, members of the public can ask up to 2 questions and have a maximum of 2 minutes per question for the question to be asked and answered. As presiding member tonight, I will allow up to 4 questions per person. Please note that sub-questions, being questions within questions, will be counted towards the total number of questions permitted. The question number and time limit is to allow fair and equal opportunity for everyone to ask their questions before the proceedings continue. So far, I have 6 members of the public who have given prior notice to asking questions, these being Ms Hollins for Bragg, Ms Hollins for herself, Martin Condosa for himself, Martin Condosa on behalf of Belmont East Ward Connect, Debbie Ransom and Adriana Capida. Anybody else, please? Nobody else? Thank you. We'll now move to the questions. Please state your name and suburb only. Remember, you have 2 minutes per question for the question to be asked and answered. First up, Ms Hollins on behalf of Bragg.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm not giving consent to be on camera, and any perceived consent is under duress. So I'm going to change my question slightly in view of your blurb that you've just read out about directly affected. Firstly, the standing orders can't be altered without the council actually amending them and going through the normal process. We've been asking for several months now, going back all this time. I think it was probably back to October, November, to define it, and you've only come up with the definition tonight.
I'm sorry, if you look into the agenda, at public question time in December, you had the explanation in there. So
I'm just wondering,
you might have missed it.
What the CEO's got to do with it when you run the meeting in making the decisions, because this great blurb that you've read out with the rules actually hasn't gone. You've said that the standing orders are very important and you've acknowledged that, but it hasn't actually gone through the Government Gazette process. We have a standing orders that don't define it.
Question, please.
So when is it going to be going through the government process? And until such times, it's sort of not part of the standing orders.
Mr CEO?
Thank you, Worship. I think your response was quite clear. The standing orders clearly articulate that any person or group wishing to make a submission or a deputation need to demonstrate how they're directly affected. The Mayor has provided an explanation on that, and to answer your question about my involvement, the standing orders also make it clear if they're submitted prior to the meeting, the CEO can make a determination. Thank you, Worship.
Next question, thank you.
Yeah, but mine were asked at the meeting, so that was up to the Mayor. That's why I'm asking. I want clarity, please.
I'm sorry?
Oh,
It's been answered already. Next question, please. Thank you.
okay. On tonight's agenda, we've got the Golden Gateway structure plan, and there's a feasibility study that's a confidential item. So my question, what exactly is a feasibility study? Is it like a cost analysis for developers for future developments in the area, and why does it need to be confidential?
Mr CEO, are you able to answer that?
Thank you, Worship. Obviously, it's confidential in accordance with the Local Government Act, and if it wasn't, then it would be made available. But I'm not sure whether the Director of Development and Communities wants to add something further. Thank you, Worship.
Over to the Director.
Through the Chair, to answer the first part of Ms. Holland's question, the feasibility study looks at development viability. So whether built densities and heights and all that are viable for development in relation to land values and prospective sale prices and all that. So that takes care of the development viability part of the question. The report from the consultant entails information about properties on Great Eastern Highway and valuations. That's why it's confidential.
Thank you.
How much did it cost for that report, Mr.
Next question is, how much did the report cost? I'm not too sure who. Mr CEO, are you able to answer that, or go to the Director?
I would probably suggest we would need to take that on notice, Your Worship.
Could you just speak up, please, Mr. Christie?
You'll need to take that on notice.
Okay,
Next
thank
question,
you.
please. Thank you.
Okay, when the public are invited to do submissions on the various things that are required under the Local Government Act, does each councillor get a copy of the full submission received by the person that does it, or do they just get a summary from the administration along with any comment in respect of the submission.
Mr CEO, can you answer that, please?
I may defer to the Director of Development and Communities, Your Worship.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the council received a summary of the submission, paraphrase of the submission.
Just a summary, was that, Wilmot?
That's what I believe he said, yes.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Right. Are we on to your personal questions? Thank you.
Okay. Last August, when I came to the agenda briefing and the Golden Gateway was on the agenda, I was allowed to do a deputation on the basis the Mayor defined me as directly affected. I spent 3 hours prior to last week's agenda briefing preparing another deputation based on the latest report, and at the meeting the Mayor refused to allow me to do on the basis I was not directly affected and he'd made his decision. I believe I'll be significantly impacted with traffic given both my proximity to the area, not to mention, in my view, the traffic that has been considered in the report counts Great Eastern Highway traffic as the now traffic as opposed to the future traffic. So my question, how come the Mayor can allow someone to be directly affected on an item in August last year, and when the same item comes to Council last week, they are not directly affected in his opinion? And I would like a response from the Mayor without taking it on notice, because I think it's fairly straightforward.
First of all, I will decide whether I take it on notice or not, and I will say that the August decision was made based on the information provided. But in hindsight, I believe you're not directly affected.
Provided to who, Mayor Rossi?
To me, in August. Thank you. Your next question, please.
I would like a response from you directly, Mayor Rossi, and without preferably taking it on notice. The presiding member, who is also runs the meeting and dictates the procedure in accordance with the standing orders, as there has been confusion in the community, I'm not sure whether it's been cleared up for anyone, does the Mayor agree that there's the Golden Gateways and agenda on item tonight, and where in the standing orders or what rule states that deputations or submissions have to be done at an agenda briefing, when the only rule I can find states the item has to be an agenda item? I refer to Standing Order 6.61, a person or group directly affected by a matter on the agenda paper and wishing to be received as a deputation by the Council.
We'll need to look through standing orders right now. If you can just be patient, please. If you look at 6.6 and 6.7, it does not factor in ordinary council meeting for submissions, so it is not. It's not covered.
I didn't actually ask
But I will refer.
asked where it said
I will
that
refer to the manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The requirement for the holding of submissions and deputations are contained at an ABF because under the Local Government Act, they're not a statutory component of an ordinary council meeting. So by default, we hold them during an ABF, not an ordinary council meeting. Thank you, Your Worship.
I do feel that question wasn't answered because I specifically said, where does it say that they can't be done at an agenda?
Mr. CEO.
As the manager of Legal and Governance has explained, they are delivered at an agenda briefing forum. The standing orders make it quite clear that it's to address the council. So whether it's an agenda briefing forum or at this council meeting, you're still addressing the council at an agenda briefing forum. But as the manager has pointed out, There's no part in the agenda of the council meeting process, ordinary general meeting, for deputations or submissions to be announced, and so therefore they're done at the agenda briefing forum, and it's the same time you're addressing the council.
So we're not actually following the standing orders to the T because it doesn't specifically say.
I'm sorry.
I'm just clarifying.
So your next question, please? Is that your question?
Oh, I'm just asking. I was getting clarification, actually.
Mr. CEO will answer that. Thank you.
Well, I would disagree that we are not applying the standing orders, because it's quite clear it says you can address the council. It does not say address the council at an ordinary council meeting. So therefore
does it say
I would argue that the standing orders are being applied consistently in this council chamber. Thank you, Your Worship.
Next question, please. Thank you.
Section 1.3 of the Local Government Act reads, the intent of the Act 2, the Act is intended to result in A, better decision-making by a local government, B, greater community participation in the decisions and affairs of local governments, and C, greater accountability of local governments to their communities. And Section 2.6A, role of the Mayor is to preside at meetings of council, ensuring that meetings are orderly and held in accordance with the Act. Section 3.7 reads, a local law made under this Act is inoperative to the extent that is inconsistent with the Act or any other written law. Article 19 of the ICCPR gives people the right to impart information. So my question, as presiding member, who is in a position of power over any resident wanting to do a deputation or submission before council, based on the fact you control who can speak and who can't. Now I've given you the information on the legislation in the Local Government Act. Do you think you're complying with the requirements of the Act when you refuse residents and have now produced a directly affected information tonight after months on things that directly affect them by saying they aren't directly affected and saying it's my decision as a response, even though up until tonight you haven't been able to define to anyone what the interpretation was when we've come to meetings and asked?
First of all, I've explained why I've not spent a long time explaining it to you, and it has been written to you. So I find that offensive. Two, yes, we're bound by the Local Government Act and regulations, and we're following them. I take them very seriously as Mayor. I don't do it lightly, and I will follow these rules, which will more than likely change in October. Until October comes, for the next 6 months or so, this is what I'll be following. Thank you.
Okay, my final question, given that we've now heard your defamation, which is going directly affected, which is going to prohibit a lot more people, no doubt. I'll have to wait till I listen to the recording again. Do you think that you're actually getting greater community participation in the decisions? Because anything that people say at a gen briefing is something is you know what a member from the community. And I'd also like to point out that we've just heard from Mr. Lowe here that you've got a feasibility study there from a developer or whoever that gives you the guidelines for how many stories we need to put and all of this sort of thing to make it feasible for them. But you have not heard from the member of the public. And we've also heard that the people in the public that do written submissions on any topic get a brief summary. They don't get the full submission. So, Mayor Rossi, how are you able to say that you're being, not disadvantaging us residents in this case to the advantage of a developer? I'd like an answer to that.
I don't believe we are disadvantaging anybody.
Oh.
And that's, no, sorry. I believe that we give everyone a fair go. You could write an email in. You could put a submission via email to us, and I would read anything that you write to me, as I've always done to any resident who contacts me or writes to me, and any other council would do the same. And this is no different to how we've done in the past.
You have a feasibility study there, but you haven't heard from a resident. That's what I'm asking.
The feasibility study is confidential, I believe.
Yeah, but you haven't seen none of the councillors, according to Mr. Lowe, saw the full deputations or submissions from any resident when they did them in accordance with the public advertising. That's my point. So you're hearing one side of the argument but not the other. That's...
I'm sorry, I have to disagree with you there. Thank you very much for your submission. We move on to Mr. Cardoso, please. Your personal questions first.
Martin Cardoso, Lyle Street, Redcliffe. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, city officers and members of the gallery. All my questions, including the preamble, are timed at less than 1 minute each. Question 1, Lyle Street continues to suffer a significant loss of amenity due to changes in traffic patterns following the opening of Central Avenue, further exacerbated by the Mooring Street speed humps. If the city reopened a long-time closed road near your home and 300 out-of-area cars began passing by at 3:30 in the morning, how do you ask for help? How do you convince council that the needs of local residents should take priority? And why is it acceptable for families to be told that 300 cars at 3:30 a.m. is simply the new normal? To help illustrate the impact on weekend and daily amenity, can the city publish the total number of vehicles recorded on Lyle Street for Saturday and Sunday respectively, and the average daily number of vehicles recorded between 6:30 p.m. and 6:30 a.m., all from the most recent October 2024 traffic count, please?
Director of Infrastructure Services.
Through you, Mayor Rossi, yes, we can, but I believe we've actually given that information to Mr. Cardoso previously.
Thank you. Next question.
Question 2. I've lived on Lyle Street for 25 years. Over the past 5 years, traffic volumes have steadily increased, more recently exploding to the point where it has become intolerable. As one of the many Lyle Street families who have come to council seeking help, we know we only have 3 options. We can sell our homes, we can accept the loss of amenity, or 3, we can fight respectfully to regain the peaceful enjoyment we once had. To help illustrate the growing trend in traffic volumes, can the city publish a line or bar graph showing the average daily traffic on Lyle Street from each traffic count since 2018 or before, if records permit?
Director of Infrastructure Services.
Through you, Mayor Rossi, yes, we can.
Thank you. Question 3. At the agenda briefing forum last Tuesday, the presiding member used their discretion to determine that a resident was not directly affected and denied their submission on 12.1 Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan. However, the Belmont Trust land held in trust for all Belmont residents is included in the structure plan as clearly illustrated on page 22 of the agenda minutes. The Belmont Trust Land Final Report of July 2022 confirms that the land is held in trust with the City of Belmont councillors acting as trustees, and that all Belmont residents have a shared legal and beneficial interest in this land. How does the city justify determining that a Belmont residence is not directly affected when the Belmont Trust land forms part of the structure plan area and is held in trust for the benefit of all residents?
When I went through the 3 points that I apply, the first point, whether a person's interests are specifically adversely impacted by this matter, I referred to an example such as those being immediately adjacent property owner in a way that's material and specific when compared to interests of others. So it doesn't fit in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question 4. I would like to preface my question by noting that I've not found any publicly available information on the city's website regarding the intersection reconfiguration at Hardy Road, Durban Street and Frederick Street, although it has been listed in the Belmont Bulletin. Given past concerns about community engagement on traffic management and road changes, it is important that residents are properly consulted, especially when multiple fatalities and serious crashes have occurred at this intersection. Any road changes, no matter how minor, should trigger the city's engagement policy and should be brought before council as an agenda item. Simply informing residents after the decision is made is not engagement or consultation. The city's community engagement policy, CP 55, states that the city will strive to keep the community informed of matters that affect them, provide information needed for meaningful participation, and ensure engagement activities inform decision-making. In line with these commitments, will the City publish the proposed reconfiguration plan, outline the associated community engagement process, and bring the proposal before Council for consideration?
Director of Infrastructure Services.
Through you, Mayor Rossi, we'll take that question on notice.
Thank you.
Mr Cardoso, on behalf of Belmont East Ward Connect.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I please seek some clarification, because I've based my questions tonight on what was provided in the response to the December questions taken on notice, and tonight you've supplied Part B of what was a Part A and Part B response to the directly affected scenario. What you've provided tonight is Part B, where you've given the circumstances whereby directly affected is assessed against the circumstances, but before that is actually a full response from the City on multiple occasions in the agenda, where the City applies a common sense approach having regard to the natural definition of each of the constituted words, directly and affected, and phrase directly affected. So that is more aligned with the definition as opposed to the circumstances, if that makes sense. But I've based my questions on what the City has supplied as a public response to my and Lisa's questions from the December. So if I could just proceed on that basis.
Ask your questions,
Thank
please.
you. So notwithstanding the clarification of tonight's definition, which was provided as Part B, Article 25 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which Australia has ratified, guarantees every citizen the right to take part in public affairs, either directly or through freely chosen representatives. The Australian Human Rights Commission recognises this as a fundamental right of democratic participation. There is no definition of directly affected in the Local Government Act 1995 or the City of Belmont Standing Orders. However, the City relies on the dictionary definition of this term, or variation tonight of this term, to deny residents the ability to speak on agenda items. How does the City justify restricting a resident's right to participate in public decision-making based on an undefined term interpreted through a dictionary rather than a legislated or policy-based definition?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that you explained that, and as far as I'm concerned, the application of the standing orders and the discretion that's allowed the presiding member at these meetings to determine whether someone is directly affected still stands. And therefore, this council has always been open to public participation. The agenda briefing forum does not have to be open to the public, yet it is. There's no requirement under the Act for that meeting to be open to the public, yet it is open. You have an opportunity to make submissions on the structure plan when it was advertised back in August, I think, and then again recently. And so there's more than adequate options for members of the public to be involved in participation in public forums such as this. And certainly I believe that the application of the standing orders and the Local Government Act are done appropriately here in this chamber. Thank you, Your Worship.
Question,
Thank you,
please.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chair. The Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action, adopted by 171 countries, including Australia, reaffirms that participation in public affairs is a fundamental human right and should not be subject to arbitrary or exclusionary restrictions. It guarantees that everyone has the right to take part in public affairs without discrimination or unnecessary limitations. Given this, how does the City justify its requirements that residents must prove they are directly affected based on a dictionary definition before being allowed to speak on an agenda item when such restriction imposes an arbitrary and exclusionary barrier to public participation?
CEO, I think you've already answered that.
Yes, Your Worship, I would suggest that my previous response adequately covers the response to that question as well.
Thank you.
Next question, please, Martin. Thank you.
The City audio records agenda briefing forums for minute-taking purposes, but does not include in the minutes a record of the residents or ratepayers who request to make a submission or deputation and are denied, nor the reasons for refusal. In October 2024, November 2024, and again last week, February 2025, a resident and/or ratepayer was denied the opportunity to speak by the presiding member based on not being considered directly affected under the dictionary definition. However, there is no record in the minutes they even made a request. Under section 5.22, 5.94 and 5.96A of the Local Government Act 1995, the city is required to keep accurate minutes and make them publicly available. How does the city justify the omission of these denied requests from the minutes, and does it consider this practice is compliant with the Act?
Before I hand over to the CEO, can I just remind you that this has been in place since 2017. It's not that Robert Rossi has suddenly made this up. I'm just being consistent as the Mayor. That's my role. Over to the CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. As you know, the minutes of agenda briefing forums in council are not recorded verbatim. Okay, so there's often a summary of a question or a summary of the responses that are provided in the minutes. But what I will do is I will take that on notice and provide a more detailed response with regard to that. But I would argue that, yes, I believe we are fully compliant with the Local Government Act and our standing orders. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you.
Question, please.
My last question. At the November 2024 Agenda Briefing Forum, I submitted a pre-meeting request to make a submission on an agenda item that I believe directly affected me. Despite this, I was denied the right to speak on the basis that I was not considered directly affected based on a dictionary definition. However, there is no public record in the minutes that I made this request or that I was denied. The city asserts that the CEO and presiding member determine whether a person is directly affected and allowed to speak. However, Standing Orders 6.6 and 6.7 allow the CEO to refer such a request to the full council for a determination. By not exercising this option, council is prevented from reviewing or overturning these decisions. Given that no formal appeal process exists for applicants denied the right to speak, I formally lodge a complaint and ask, why is the council not being given the opportunity to exercise its discretion under the standing orders, and what process exists for an applicant to request a review of their denied request by the full council rather than having it determined solely by the CEO or presiding member?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Worship. Submissions and deputations are made at an agenda briefing forum, and an agenda briefing forum is not a decision-making forum, so that's one reason why council doesn't. As I've explained previously at council meetings, there's an opportunity for myself to make a determination if it is provided in advance of the meeting. I also have an opportunity of discussing that with the mayor prior to the meeting and to make a determination. And as I previously mentioned at one of the council meetings the last few months, there has never been a need to present it to council for them to make a decision, because the mayor and I have always made that decision in accordance with the standing orders. So that's the reason why. But I note that you said you're making a formal complaint, so if you would like to put that in writing to me, then I'll pass that on and we can deal with it.
Am I required to put it in writing?
I think your comments were you wanted to make a formal complaint, so I would suggest that you put that in writing to me.
Is it a policy requirement that I put it in writing?
If you want to make a formal complaint in writing so we can investigate it, and I will pass that on to the complaints officer to deal with.
Can I ask the governance officer if it's a requirement?
Thank you, Mayor Rossi. It needs to be in writing to be formal. The requirement for formality is met by it being submitted in writing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to Debbie Ransom.
Debbie Ransom, Ascot. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, staff and public. Firstly, I would like to state that I do not agree that my image is on camera. The city's activity centre planning strategy includes an action to implement travel behaviour programs to encourage the use of alternative modes of transport. My questions based on this statement are, using the term to encourage the use of alternative modes of transport, are the council trying to implement the urban planning concept of a 15-minute city?
Director of Infrastructure Services, would you be able to, or is it over to Director of Development Communities? Who would like to take that on?
Through you, Mayor Rossi, we'll
Thank you.
take that on notice.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'll take it on notice and get back to you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Can the council outline what a travel behaviour program looks like and how it will be rolled out to residents?
Director of Infrastructure Services.
Again, we'll take that on notice, Mayor Rossi.
Okay, last one. In the current agenda, it says that we are conforming to the Peel 3,500,000 plan and that Belmont needs to create 10, I think it's over 10,000, maybe 10,400 dwellings. Can the council give an update of where they are at?
Director of Development and Communities.
I'll have to take that question on notice, Mr. Mayor.
I'm on notice. Thank you.
We'll get back to you. Thank you. Adriana Cepeda.
Good evening, all. My name Adriana Cepeda, Ascot. And thank you for the opportunity to ask some questions. My first question is about having an update on the Belmont Charitable Trust Line planning stages and when the plan will be available to the community.
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regard to the trust land, a couple of years ago that was placed on hold as a result of other priorities such as Wilson Park and a few other major projects that were being developed. But what I can share with you is that a master plan for the trust land is currently under development and we're expecting that to be received here at the City sometime in April. And after we receive that, then we will need to consider what options for funding for the implementation of that. But the master plan was quite clear. The community consultation that we undertook was pretty clear that it would be for public enjoyment, and that's certainly something that will be considered in the coming months. Thank you, Your Worship.
So I asked this question and a similar question back in September, and your budget for this land included the appointment of a coordinator to develop this plan. So has that coordinator been appointed because $30,000 were allocated for that appointment and to have that person doing this planning?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sure the Director will correct me if I'm wrong. It wasn't for a coordinator to be appointed. I think it was of a contractor or a landscape contractor to prepare that master plan. That's currently being done, and we hope to receive that in April this year. Thank you, Your Worship.
Next question, please.
And I had a similar question that it was asked and for others. And I just want to know who developed the confidential report used by the Council to justify the increase in height from 6 to 9 to 10, 15, and potentially 20, and in the Golden Gateway local structure plan. When I'm asking who, I'm asking about what are the qualifications, and it was a team, and how many people were involved, and what are the expertise.
Director of Development Communities, there's a lot there, so you may need to take it on notice.
Through the Chair, I'm happy to answer that. So the City engaged qualified consultants who have expertise in the field of property valuation and development forecasting. I don't know the intricacies of who on the team was involved, but they are certainly qualified and have the credentials for such an evaluation. What I would also add is that the WA Planning Manual Guidance for Structure Plans talks about the designation of densities and therefore logically the height of buildings based on various factors including feasibility and market demand. So that is an aspect of the structure plan that WAPC will ultimately evaluate as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yes, the last question is about how the contributions of multiple current and proposed developments are factored into the infill targets. And I specifically asked about this because things are being treated separately. You have got the Golden Gateway local extraction plan, but you also have got the race course. Potentially you can have the kilns, and then also you have got the Bellevue apartments and many other developments. So I just wondering if you are not considering twice these things, and how is the strategy of looking at the whole picture instead of I want 4,000 dwellings here, 2,000 dwellings here. Remember that the race course are 2 towers of 15 stories plus 43 units around the house.
A response for you, Director of Development and Communities. How do you organise it? How do you look at it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So as far as current dwelling numbers go, we rely on census data to establish the uptake or construction of dwellings. And with that information, track how we are achieving the interim targets for dwelling numbers. What we also do is ensure that the planning framework enables future development of dwellings as well. What I would point out is precincts like the Springs contributed to the larger part of all the dwellings that were developed in the previous interim period. And without precincts like that, we are unlikely to achieve the required targets set by the state government. We should also be mindful that the enabling framework doesn't, like the structure plan, for instance, doesn't mean that dwellings will get developed. So without proper feasibility, where developers can proceed to develop dwellings and make a return on it, it's unlikely that the uptake of multiple dwellings and apartments will occur. And that has been the assessment on properties along Great Eastern Highway in previous years. And that's why planning for these precincts are important.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions.
No, I don't have any further questions.
Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you. Ms. G?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Janet G. Cloverdale. In the documentation for the Golden Gate, it refers to traffic congestion that we might face. It appears that the traffic's been considered that will be using Great Eastern Highway is the traffic it now carries, not future traffic from the DA6 and places like Guildford, Midland and the Hills, which is also growing. Therefore, this report could be inaccurate if it's not looking to the future. So my question is, could we please point out where in this report it establishes that the future traffic of Great Eastern Highway is being considered when written and not just the traffic it faces now?
Development and Communities, how do we look at traffic, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify that the management of traffic on main roads is the responsibility of the main roads. So Great Eastern...
Can you move a little bit closer to the mic or bring it closer? Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
So traffic on Great Eastern Highway is the responsibility of main roads. Just to also clarify that the Golden Gateway local structure plan does not actually induce development. Development can occur now anyway. So it is zone mixed use. The scheme provision for the mixed use zone does not prescribe any height limits or plot ratio or maximum plot ratio standards. So what this local structure plan does is provides certainty for the future development of the precinct, and it's not actually adding traffic to the precinct.
Next question, please.
A couple of quick ones before I've got a little long one. Mr. Mayor and CEO, would it not be easier to let people speak rather than trying to shut them up? Far easier just to let them have a say than say you're directly affected. And I totally disagree with not being directly affected with the trust land, because that trust land is in trust for everybody and you can't all live next door to it.
My response is this has been in place since 2017. Council could at any time start the process to remove it, but everyone has kept it over all the years. And I will apply the rules that are down there that are listed there for me as mayor. I take the position very seriously. I'm not doing it. You're right. It could be easier doing that way there, but then I'll be breaking rules. Thank you.
Well, that's yours.
The CEO would like to add his bit, please.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to point out the statement made by Ms G, I believe, is somewhat incorrect and not in good faith. This council is not trying to shut anyone up. If you're directly affected by the matter on the agenda and in accordance with the standing orders, you would have an opportunity to speak. Thank you, Worship.
Okay.
Next question, please. Thank you.
Can I just ask, was the feasibility study ordered or requested by the city or provided by someone else?
Director of Development and Community.
Through the chair, as I answered in a previous question, the city commissioned the feasibility study, and I also pointed out that it is within the WA planning manual guidance for structure plans that feasibility is an aspect that will be assessed as part of a local structure plan.
Okay.
Your next question.
Yeah. My next question is regarding a response taken on notice from the December meeting. Before I do, I would like to congratulate Council on their submissions and everything else for Abernethy Road. I took great care in putting a submission in for that one and answering each topic as to what I thought worked for that area because I use it constantly. I think that your end result and end goal of number 6 is absolutely terrific. And we've all seen a difference down there. The only thing that's a bit putting off at the moment is there seem to be having accidents at the next intersection down at Keene Street now. But, you know, once we get a plan up and running, that's going to make that road a lot cleaner, a lot better to travel on. So thank you for doing that anyway. But mine goes back to the bollards where I asked about the safety of crossing for people if a car can go between the bollards that you've put on the corner of Gabriel and Abernethy. And the response, which is probably in your minutes, is the services conflict, including water and telecoms and limited space, require the bollards to be installed at an optimum location between 1.2 and 1.5 metres apart. Bollards are not installed on the pram ramp as they can cause obstruction for pedestrian movements. The bollards were installed in line with the city's specifications and those able to be supplied by the industry. So I'm asking again, do we think them bollards are at a right distance? Because I can tell you right now, the distance between the two inner bollards is 4.31 metres. You can get a truck in there. So that is nowhere near what you've said about being 1.2 and 1.5 apart. It's not safe. Yes, you've put 3 bollards up against my wall. Thank you very much. That did save it. But somebody wanting to cross there, the bollards are ineffective because a car and bigger can go through that.
A response for your last question. Director of Infrastructure Services.
Through you, Mayor Rossi, if people want to cross, we can't obstruct them from crossing. So, to be honest, I don't fully understand the query. At every crossing in the city, they're not obstructed. People are able to cross. So we can't put bollards in the way of crossing.
I'm not asking for the obstruction, but when you go to a pedestrian crossing thing, the bollards here, and if they are 1.2 or 1.5 apart, it would stop most normal cars now being SUVs and stuff like that from actually hitting anybody that's waiting to cross the road. These bollards are 4.3 metres apart, and that's what I'm saying. What is the use of having them bollards there? Because if a car is coming in that direction, they're going to go straight through the middle.
Thank you. We've heard that. So what she's referring to is the distance of the bollards, if I've heard it correctly.
Yes.
Are you able to answer that, Director of Infrastructure Services? It's the distance, I believe. And also the CEO would like to add, because I believe Ms G is saying cars and four-wheel drives can get through. But I think you're talking about there's services underground that may stop it. But I hand over to the expert, Director of Infrastructure Services.
Through you, Mayor Rossi, we have answered this several times, and that it was very challenging at that junction to install bollards given the location of the services, and also that it is a crossing. So the teams have installed them as best they can, given the obstructions that are there and the requirement to keep a crossing clear.
CEO, would you like to add something?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Worship. From memory, the bulk of the accidents at that intersection were caused by right turn movements out of Gabriel and across Abernethy Road. Since the closure of that median, then that right-hand movement has ceased. And as you pointed out, we're now seeing similar issues down at Keene Street. So the reality here is those bollards were there and designed, obviously, to cater and protect your property from damage as a result of the right turn movements. Those right turn movements no longer happen, and I would suggest that that will end up being a permanent closure. So there's nothing stopping a car from mounting any footpath in our city, and so we can't have bollards along every single footpath at every single intersection across the city and along Great Eastern Highway. But as I said, the fact that that median is now closed means that that intersection is significantly safer than it was when it was open.
And I do
and there's further investigations to be done on the intersections at Keene and at Fulham, and that is being addressed through the study. Thank you,
Ms. G.
And I do thank you for that, but I would like to state I've never actually used my property for them bollards. It's always been about people walking down and their safety. And in this regard, I'd like to say that I disagree with being on camera, and there's a lot more people out there suffering domestic violence, so we need to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There being no more questions, I close public question time at 7:27 p.m. Confirmation of minutes received from Matrix of the Agenda Briefing Forum held on the 18th of February. Are there any questions on the Matrix? No. Can I have a move and a second to receive and note the Matrix? Moved by Councillor Sessions. Is there a problem? Sorry? We haven't gone to. We've got a mover by Councillor Sessions, seconded by Councillor Harris. We'll now go to electronic voting. Voting is now open. Please use the buttons on your microphone screen. Carried unanimously. Thank you. (6.2) Ordinary Council meeting held on the 10th of December. Are there any questions on the minutes? May I have a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes as a true and accurate record? Moved by Councillor Sakula, seconded by Councillor Sessions. Voting is now open. Please use the buttons on your microphone screen. We're missing one. Could we see? Oh, no, we've got full. Councillor Davis, we need you to vote. Thank you. Fantastic. Carried 8-0, unanimous. 7, questions by members on which due notice has been given. There are none. Questions by members without notice. There are none. Response to questions taken on notice. There are none. Questions by members without notice. Are there any questions by members? No. Number 9. Are there any new business of an urgent nature approved by the presiding member or by decision? I don't believe there is any. No. Business adjourned from the previous meeting. There is none. Reports of committees. There are none. We now move to 12, reports of administration. We have 12.1, Golden Gateway Structure Plan, withdrawn by Councillor Gurjitsky. 12.2, Final Adoption Amendment number 22, Councillor Gurjitsky. 12.3, Development Application for Warehouse. No. Policy Review, Electoral Caretaker Period Policy. Councillor Sessions. Accounts for payments for December last year, 2024. There are none. Monthly financial report for December of last year, 2024. There are none. Accounts for payments for January of this year, 2025. There are none. Monthly financial report for January of this year, 2025. There are none. Statutory compliance audit return for 2024. No. So, with the exception of 12.1, 12.2, 12.4, may I have a mover and second to adopt the balance of the reports en bloc by absolute majority decision, with the exception of items 12.1, 12.2, 12.4. I need a mover, Councillor Sessions, seconded by Councillor Sakula. Voting is now open. Please use the buttons on your microphone screen. Voting is now closed. Carried unanimously. For those people present in the gallery, please note that those items that have not been withdrawn have now been adopted by Council. You're welcome to stay and observe the remainder of tonight's proceedings, or you may wish to leave when convenient. As outlined previously, please do not rely on any Council decision until formal notification has been received in writing. Thank you. 12.1, Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan. First of all, I'd like to advise, in accordance with section 5.232B and E of the Local Government Act 1985, Council will need to go behind closed doors if any questions on the confidential attachments for item 12.1, Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan, are raised. Are there any questions, first of all, on the confidential attachments for item 12.1? No, we can proceed then. May I have a move and a second to go behind? It was moved by Councillor Kulczycki. I need a seconder, Councillor Sessions. So, over to you, the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm moving an amendment motion that I've submitted.
It's not on screen. Yeah.
Please be patient.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I move this amended motion for Council to recommend the draft Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan to the West Australian Planning Commission, subject to amendments involving the removal of the 30km/h speed zone, and to instruct the CEO to investigate the provision of a community development contribution plan for the purpose of implementing overall underpass infrastructure between the precinct and Sonham Street and Great Eastern Highway, and report the preliminary findings to Council for consideration on whether to include this in a future scheme amendment. And I highlight the following reasons substantiating this amendment. So it is important to note that Council itself cannot determine speed limits. Therefore, it is appropriate to defer to main roads or independent traffic engineers to determine appropriate speed limits, ensuring that planning decisions are grounded in evidence-based modelling, optimising safety and efficiency. Commencement of the necessary investigations into a developer contribution plan relating to costs and feasibility ensures Council can make a well-informed decision. This provides flexibility in timing if a DCP is progressed, and scope to incorporate the DCP as part of the associated amendment for Golden Gateway, or pursue it separately at a later stage if necessary. The proposed modifications support the city's strategic vision for this precinct as a vibrant area of residential and mixed use. Improving pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure, including overpass or underpasses, will facilitate safer and more efficient movement into and out of the Golden Gateway precinct. And this aligns with the draft local structure plan's vision to provide a strengthened connection to the Swan River and Ascot waters. Establishing direct links to the Belmont Trust land offers residents valuable recreational opportunities, enhancing the precinct's appeal. The Belmont Trust land is intended for public enjoyment and recreation, providing significant amenity for future residents and visitors. By promoting infrastructure that encourages walking and cycling, the motion supports sustainable transport options, potentially reducing traffic congestion and environmental impact. Enhanced access to recreational spaces and improved safety measures contribute positively to health and well-being of current and future residents. Improved accessibility is likely to attract more visitors, thereby expanding the customer base for local businesses and stimulating economic development within the precinct. A well-informed analysis means an associated DCP within the local planning scheme ensures that infrastructure costs are equitably shared amongst developers, facilitating the timely provision of essential public amenity. Overall, the Golden Gateway Structure Plan is a well-constructed, consulted, and is further enhanced by the amendments put forward for consideration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The seconder.
Thank you, Mayor Rossi. I support this motion as well. We have to remember that it's not a development application and all future development applications will be scrutinised individually. This local structure plan is not going to encourage developers to start building. Developers can already build here. The structure plan sets limitations and guidance for developers. I support Councillor Kulczycki's reasons for removing the 30k speed limit, which would affect Resolution Drive, Daly Street and Hargreaves Street. But we do have room in our movement and access strategy to review ways to make streets safer for pedestrians and cyclists. And removing this speed limit proposal now does not mean that we can't advocate for it later. I support the investigation into a development contribution plan. An overpass or underpass would connect pedestrians with the precinct, and this is a great way to fund it. Such a crossing allows our communities safer connection with local amenities. The state government have made it clear that we must infill. I don't want to see any more of our natural environment destroyed. We absolutely must provide homes for people, but we also must protect our green spaces because once that's gone, we'll never get it back. Ascot has the largest amount of public open space in our city, and we need to hold on to that. And the only way, I believe, is to build up and not build out.
Thank you. Need a move. Speaker for or against? Councillor Marx.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to foreshadow a motion which the mover may wish to take on board. And that is with his motion he has here, I'd like a piece added to it which he reads, subject to removing the proposed speed zone of 30 kilometres an hour, I'd like to add to it and replace it with a 40 kilometre an hour zone. So I don't believe that 30 kilometres an hour is acceptable there, especially in Stoneham Street, Resolution Drive and parts of Grandstand Road. I think that they are major arteries in our city. Slowing them to 30 kilometres an hour, I think, is unacceptable. Now, I don't know whether the mover would accept that being added.
The mover, what's your feeling on this? And are those streets actually covered by that 40, by the 30? I didn't think some of them were. Can we get clarification? Can I just get clarification from the direct development communities? Those streets that were mentioned, are they all covered by the 30 kilometres that was proposed?
If I may have a minute, Mr. Mayor, I'll just look up the information.
whole zone.
Mr. Mayor, just to confirm, it's Hargrave Street, Daly Street, and the the southern part of Grandstand Road that would be subject to the speed, the proposed speed limitations.
Yeah. So it's Grandstand Road only in the triangle that's being considered for 30. All right. Councillor Mark?
Stoneham Street and Resolution Drive, which are in aren't they in the actual zone of the area?
Director of Development Communities, are you able to answer that question?
Through the chair, the diagram on page 33 of the agenda outlines in a dashed line the 30-kilometer speed zone boundary, and that excludes Stoneham Street and Resolution Drive. It's intended to include Hargrave Street, Daly Street, and that portion of Grandstand Road only.
That's a recommended pedestrian and cyclist facilities.
Your question, please. Sorry, Mr.
That's the page 33 diagram is talking about recommended pedestrian and cyclist facilities.
It's inside the dotted lines.
Sorry, that's inside the dotted line, and speed limit zone boundary. I'm sorry, I missed that. So that's
Director of Development and Communities, are you able to clarify that, please?
Through the chair, yeah, it's the shaded area within the dash line. So I believe Councillor Marx has now clarified that he's seen the annotations in the diagram.
Yep, okay, I would withdraw my motion at that point.
Withdrawn. Thank you, Councillor Marx.
It doesn't include Resolution Drive or Stoneham Street, which I thought it did. So I will withdraw that. Only to say, with the second part of the motion, I have nothing great against it. However, I do note that the development contribution plans that we have tried to put in place over the last 20 years have led to some big arguments, and people, of course, are not too happy about contribution plans. And I would be surprised if the main roads would accept it as far as building another overpass or an underpass. We attempted these with the Springs, and there was an underpass already there, but none of the others actually got up. So main roads are not keen on these, I would say, and the main reason being that they cost an awful lot of money. So I have nothing against looking into it, but I think you'll find that the cost and the attitude of main roads may not be acceptable. Anyway, I'm prepared to accept that we look into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marx. Anybody else wishes to speak for or against? Councillor Davis.
I'll speak for, just touching with part 2 with the implementing the over-underpass. If it's absolutely necessary to have a over or underpass in that area, because crossing that road, you come from Belmont, Cloverdale, Kewdale, Rivervale, you want to go to the river, you want to use the open space. It's very difficult crossing, is it 6 lanes, Great Eastern Highway? And even the lights, you're scrambling to get across there. There's going to be more traffic. I think, okay, main roads might not be happy about it, or the builder might not be happy about it, but we have to lobby for it. So I think as a future planning, something for the future, we have to keep this in here, part 2, and I think it's really important that we lobby for it, just for pedestrian safety.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be voting against this structure plan as amended by Councillor Kulczycki, but this is not an easy decision. I commend Councillor Kulczycki's addition in investigating development-funded pedestrian access across Stoneham and Great Eastern Highway. I hope if this plan is passed that this comes into effect. This would allow people living in the Golden Gateway safe access to the Belmont Trust land and to the riverside. Close access between high-density mixed-use development and the riverside is a missing component of what is otherwise a commendable proposal from our planning team. The plan as written is a good one and has the potential to create a vibrant neighbourhood in a place that is currently underutilised. But as we will be essentially creating this neighbourhood from scratch, it's important that we aim to make the best place that we can. Our planning team has put forward a good plan, including extensive sustainability measures and advocacy for things outside of our control. The potential for a welcoming, exciting area with close access to the river and to transport is real, and we should be aiming to make that the best place it can be. Part of that was the recommendation to have streets designed for 30 k's an hour. The 3 streets, the short ones that are affected by that speed, do not need to be 50. Having the speed at 50 would save less than 10 seconds, even end to end, on the longest one considered. They especially do not need this speed when surrounded by active, vibrant future storefronts, restaurants, and other street-level commercial activity. This is a counterproductive step, I believe, in a place that could be a low noise but bustling area if designed in such a way. It may seem that this is inconsequential, but the design of those streets will come down to our engineers, who are very capable of designing in a slow street to begin with, one where driving at a pedestrian-friendly speed is not just insisted by a sign, but the natural speed to drive by design. This is done by narrowing, inbuilt chicanes, and nearby tree planting, among other methods. The choice to design that speed can and should be made now, rather than designing for 50 and passing the buck to main roads to retrofit to 30 if they so wish. If we need data on this, we could have requested more information on the case for 30 k's an hour, or we could consider the advice from our National Road Safety Strategy. A pedestrian hit by a car at 30 k's an hour has a 90% chance of surviving, and at 50 k's an hour, it's a 90% chance of death. I note and have followed the community engagement and passion of many, particularly in Ascot Waters. The organisation and engagement of many is a good thing. More people should be aware of and engaged in...
I'm sorry, you need to speak through me, so please speak through me.
Fine.
Thank you.
I hope this experience will either be a continuation or the beginning of council advocacy for the people who've submitted and attended these meetings. After hearing concerns of traffic, building heights, pedestrian safety and parking, and listened to the advice of our officers, I'm satisfied that traffic impacts will be easily taken up by the high-capacity Stoneham Street, Great Eastern Highway and Resolution Drive. That proximity to transport routes is part of what makes this an attractive location. Parking will be an issue, but that will be dealt with on an individual development level, where I have no doubt that it will be deeply considered. On building heights, there is a practicality element here. We need housing, not just Belmont, but Perth overall. Housing will not be built out of sheer generosity, so if we set limitations on building heights that don't allow some profit for development, then no housing will end up being built. Analysis from our officers has made that starkly clear. It's clear that the economics do not allow limits to be as low as what was proposed 5 years ago. The losers out of reverting to those limits include our community, who may be not accessing housing and ultimately be priced out of the area. Ultimately, this is a chance for us to build a fantastic place to live in a location that has enormous potential. I hope that the plan as proposed is built with the additional development-funded pedestrian infrastructure. However, the rejection of a low-speed, street-level environment is, I believe, a mistake, and so I will not be voting for the plan as amended. Thank you, Mayor Rossi.
Anybody else wishes to speak? Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I move to speak against the motion. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Kulczycki in his concept of his plan. I think it's a really interesting one, and I think it shows merit. But unfortunately, given the fact that it's attached to the other part of the motion, I can't vote for it, but I do thank him for his efforts in that. Since being on council, one of my roles is to listen and to respect the views of individuals that live in our area. Our roles as councillors is to pretty much represent the voices of those individuals and to represent them at every level. The other part of our role is to ensure that whatever where I'm voting on has long-lasting, outcomes, good outcomes for our local area. And when I consider the Golden Gateway over the last 7 years that I've been on council, for me, the Golden Gateway is an iconic piece of land. It's a way in which we can open our city up to the rest of Perth. It's a welcoming statement, and so therefore needs to be developed with a great deal of care. Once it's developed, you'll never get it back. And so this is an opportunity for us to develop it with a great deal of care. For example, we've had a streamline of residents that have entered into this chamber on many occasions to talk about the development in this area. And the consensus from those individuals that live in that area, that are impacted in that area, is very much so that they don't want heights of that level. They are comfortable with a 6'9" height, but they're not comfortable with the revised heights. Now, they've made that really, really clear. We have gone to consultation to those individuals that live in our area, and our role as councillors is to represent that view. Now, residents have said to us time and time again, they do not want that type of arrangement. Now, it's either you take on board the consultation that you've done, or you don't go through the facade of doing one. Now, irrespective of what argument that anyone wants to put in there, any type of high-rise in that space is going to generate traffic on a major level. Now, there is already a great deal there now, and it's only going to escalate. So why value add to that by creating more, much more issues in that space? Parking is going to be an issue. Now, we've got the perfect example of that in the Springs. The perfect example of that. And it doesn't matter what you try to do now to backward map the Springs, you're never going to solve that issue there. You're just not going to. So that's going to be a major issue there. If we want height, we can go further down the highway and we can build as much as we want down that way. But this is an opening statement. This is iconic. We need to preserve it. We need to make it sustainable. And that's what we need to be looking at. Now, in terms of, open space, it doesn't matter what anybody says. You can never have enough open space. Parkland, open space, it gives you a healthy lifestyle. Now, that Golden Gateway, apart from being an iconic place, needs to have open space. You cannot simply say the Belmont Trust is going to cater for that. Because it's been 30 years and the Belmont Trust hasn't developed, and it's probably going to be another 30 years as well, because that's influenced by money, and the Trust hasn't got that sort of funds in order to develop the Trust land. So when we consider open space, we need to exclude the Trust land, because that's a separate entity, and we need to consider the amount of open space that we've got in that respective area there. So we need to consider that. I love infill targets and stats around that. Now, irrespective of what the state government says, Belmont has over the years fulfilled its infill. Now, those targets are going to go up. Of course they will, but it's our remit. It's our obligation to advocate for our residents, for our city around that space. That is part of our role. And yes, things can change in that space. The comment was made about the plan doesn't create an increase in the amount of cars in the area, or it doesn't create a situation that firms are going to develop and make it higher and so forth. Well, it provides a framework through which we enable that to actually happen. So if we don't tighten that space and look after that iconic area, then you're going to lose the real beauty and the importance of that area. So based on those elements, I feel that we need to seriously consider what is there. We need to revise this plan, and we need to do it by reflecting the consultation, by reflecting the voices of our residents in that area that are impacted by it and others that use that area, to ensure that we get positive outcomes, better outcomes, lasting outcomes. Thank you, Your Worship.
I believe everyone except Councillor Ryan. Would you like to speak before I speak, or?
No, I haven't got anything to say on that.
So, no. Okay, if everyone has spoken, before I go back to the mover, I'll speak. I have carefully considered the report prepared by officers and find their reasoning behind the additional stories well explained. We have qualified planners addressing the concerns raised in submissions, and while you have the right to disagree, their work has been thorough and considered. Furthermore, activating this undeveloped area will bring more urgently needed housing to the city. We also have to acknowledge that the West Australian Planning Commission will ultimately decide the future of the Golden Gateway. From experience, I know they have the authority to take it in any direction. However, looking at the springs in Rivervale, I have concerns that concentrating development in the Golden Gateway can bring similar challenges for future residents. Increasing height may only compound these issues, and I have to be mindful of the long-term impacts. Additionally, I do not support any that imposes on the kilns. While the kiln site awaits its fate, and I hope the WAPC follows Council's second option put forward, because we've put forward two, and that is developing it as a destination without infill, as I see immense tourism value in the kilns, particularly in complementing the Ascot Racecourse. The Golden Gateway will overshadow the kilns. With the chimney stack standing at 21 metres, a potential 10-storey building reaching 24 to 30 metres would overwhelm the site, and I don't believe this should happen. When it comes to traffic, we have to recognise that Garrett Road Bridge and Grandstand Road are regional roads designed to carry large volumes of vehicles, and this will continue regardless of tonight's decision. Additionally, Ascot Waters is naturally protected with two access points in and out as primarily residential area. However, the increasing pressure on nearby roundabouts may cause issues for Ascot Water residents, making it critical for the city to advocate for traffic lights at both roundabouts sooner rather than later. That said, I'm deeply concerned about the removal of the proposed 30-kilometre speed zone. In high-density areas, I believe it's essential that we encourage slower vehicle speeds for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists. From my experience, main roads seem to default to the standard speed limits, so we must push for lower speeds to ensure a safe and accessible environment. Ultimately, this is about striking the right balance between development and community well-being. I'm concerned that we've said just move the high-rise down further towards Redcliffe. That's not going to solve it. I believe in supporting development in this area at a reduced height to avoid the issues that I've raised, and this should be anywhere, ensuring that growth remains measured and truly beneficial for all residents, both present and future. Back to the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I provide my closing remarks, I have noticed on the screen we have an old version of the motion as compared to the memorandum that's been circulated to Council with the final version of this motion.
We'll see if we can get that up for you. you please read it out, because we're just trying to find it. So just give officers time to find it. Would you be able to read what the changes are? And in fact, I believe we have it in front of us. But could you read it out loud for the ratepayers in the gallery, please?
Yes, so I'll read the entirety of the motion just to avoid any doubt or confusion. So point 1, that council pursuant to Schedule 2, Part 4, Clause 20 of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015 recommend the draft Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan, Attachment 12.1.1, and supporting technical appendices, attachments 12.1.2 through to 12.1.6, incorporating the modifications detailed in attachment 12.1.10, is approved by the West Australian Planning Commission, subject
Can I just
to
stop
removing...
you there? Now we're going into what's been added, just so everybody understands, until it goes on the screen. Go ahead.
And this is the added section, subject to removing the proposed speed zone of 30 kilometres per hour. And then point 2 is an amendment, direct the Chief Executive Officer to investigate the provision of a development contribution plan for the purpose of implementing over-underpass infrastructure between the Golden Gateway Precinct and Stoneham Street and Great Eastern Highway, and report the preliminary findings to Council for consideration on whether to include this in a future scheme amendment.
Thank you. We'll just see on the screen. Just waiting for it to upload. Thank you for your patience. It's on the screen. Just check to see if that is what you submitted. I'd like to sum up, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Golden Gateway Local Structure Plan provides the market a signal that Council is serious about progressing a well-developed and considered plan to encourage high quality and environmentally sustainable development to occur in this precinct. Realisation of this vision would represent a departure from the low quality uses we see today and as evidenced in the report provided by officers. The inclusion of a DCP further enhances the benefits for future residents from being landlocked within the precinct. A successful implementation of the DCP complements the aims of the sustainability criteria, which would allow a 5-storey bonus of height controls in exchange for over and above environmentally sustainable building features incorporated into a building's design. The removal of a 30 kilometre per hour speed zone is acceptable, as the movement and access strategy contained within the officer's report includes alternative approaches to prioritise pedestrian and cyclist movements through the precinct. If they are implemented, this will contribute to a pleasant streetscape that balances the needs of all road users. This is aside to the fact of the contrived geography of the precinct, which by default would make the potential for speeding highly unlikely. I'll cite an example of Amsterdam as an example of a city with sound urban engineering. The urban infrastructure is built to optimise efficiency for all road users, either by road, foot or bicycle. Imposition of arbitrary low speed without the supporting evidence would be contrary to sound evidence-based decision-making. By recommending this plan, Council designates appropriate density for predefined areas, protecting low-density areas which must be protected, and paves the way for the logical construction of the city's new local planning scheme for later this year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to a vote. If you look at the screen, look at your screen, please. And voting is just checking, just waiting for approval. Voting is now open. Please vote using the button on your screen. We have a 4-4. I will vote against it, so it'll be 5-4. It is lost. Let's see, correct. To the original motion. Now the officer's recommendation. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Sessions. Over to you, Councillor Harris. So I've cast my vote against the motion. So we now go back to the council's original motion. Over to you, Councillor Harris. Is the technology.
Oh, there we go. Got it.
We're all clear now. Back to you, Councillor Harris.
Not much more to say. It's the reintroduction of that 30k speed limit is enough to get me on board, and later on in the year when we come to the local planning scheme, then we can look at that development contribution plan. Thank you.
Excuse me, Your Worship, can I raise a point of order, please?
Go ahead.
I'm just a bit confused here, because we've just had a motion where there was a 4-4 split. Then you voted for it.
Presiding member,
Yep.
I voted against it. Yes, cast my vote.
One of those individuals who voted against the motion is now voting for the motion.
He's moving the original motion put forward by council.
Isn't that what was in?
No.
No. The actual first bit of the first.
Yes, but if you look at Councillor Sekula's motion, Councillor Kulczycki's motion, he included removal of the 30 kilometres and then another paragraph in there where he added about the contribution. So that's now...
Yes, but I understand that bit, but it's the first part in that motion where that is part one there. Isn't part one of that motion the same as part one of this motion, bar the 30Ks?
Yes. It's going back to the original motion now, council motion. The officer motion.
Bar 30K zone, by 30K zone.
Mr CEO?
Thank you. So what's been moved by Councillor Kulczycki is an amendment to the officer recommendation. So that amendment to part one included removing the 30 km/h speed zone. So that was an amendment to part one. And then he had a part two about the developer contribution plan. Council have voted on that. It was 4-4. The presiding member in a simple majority has a casting vote. and he's exercised that and voted against. So we now fall back to the original council officer recommendation in the agenda item 12.1, and that's where we're at this moment.
So I appreciate all of that, but take out the bit referencing the speed zone of 30 k's. The rest of that part one is the same. Is that right?
But part of that he may not have wanted to support. So
no, but that's why I'm clarifying. So bar that 30 k's, that's the only issue that Councillor Harris had with that part one. Great.
So,
right.
Councillor Harris, if
that's really
want to
interesting.
speak. Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thanks for that comment. Yes, I'm done. I've had my say.
Councillor Session.
Thanks, Mayor Rossi. Can I please ask for just a bit of clarification about this? If this motion is lost, then it goes to the WAPC to make a decision on this plan.
Mr. CEO.
I believe that's the case. We have to notify the WAPC, I think, by the 28th of this month, but the Director of Development and Communities could easily respond if I'm incorrect.
Director, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the CEO is correct.
Thank you, that's all.
You don't wish to speak on the motion? No? Anyone wish to speak for or against? Councillor Kulczycki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak against this motion as presented, citing the reasons I provided through the amended motion that we discussed previously. The imposition of a 30km/h speed zone through the precincts is arbitrary and wasn't supported in evidence in the report. And without this DCP, we're sending the wrong signal, I believe, to the market. That we're not serious about sustainability or environmental credentials. The bonus criteria that are now presented to us without the potential of a DCP, of course, theoretically we could discuss it at a later stage, is not present, and now therefore the environmental benefit that may be realised from the additional bonus criteria is no longer suitable, so I won't be supporting this officer recommendation.
Anybody else wish to speak for it or against? No? Councillor Davis.
Mayor. So just as Councillor Sessions said, if this motion doesn't go forward, then it goes back to the Department of Planning. We've spent, I think, 8 years that I can remember, no, 6 years that I can remember talking about this in information forums, thrashing it out, how many heights, where's everything going to go with the planning department, how to get it, community consultation, I think a couple of times. We have spoken about this so many times of what we think is best for the residents, the people of Belmont, the people of Perth. And so if this doesn't get through tonight, it's going to go to the Department of Planning and we are going to have no influence over it. They are going to basically decide what happens. So if you think 10 stories is a lot, then just wait and see what happens. So yeah, what was the point of 6 years if this doesn't get through? Probably even longer before I got on. So yeah, so I'm speaking for this motion.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Sakula.
Thank you, Your Worship. Nothing in greater depth from what I added before, but what's the point? What is the point of consulting with residents and asking for their opinion if you're not going to take what they say on board? We have discussed it, you're absolutely right, time and time again. We've asked them what their view is, they've told us what they want and what they don't want, and yet we say, that's okay, we're going to do our thing, or we're going to follow the government's line. We have to be advocating for our residents, we have to be advocating for our local area, we have to be doing what is in the best interests for our local area. And the Springs is a perfect example of the future impact that any type of a development is going to have in the Golden Gateway area. So if we've learnt nothing from that interesting experience, from the journey around that, then we've learnt nothing at all. So it's either you're on council to do what's the right thing for individuals, or you're simply not.
Sorry, point of order there.
That's
Everybody is here doing the right thing, what they believe, and they will vote accordingly. Yeah, that's a little bit too strong. Thank you.
Thank you.
Else wish to speak? Councillor Martin.
Just to say that Councillor Davis has got the right idea here, that we're here to put forward something that will help the people. And if you think that you want lower height, then you're not going to get it by knocking this back. Because once this gets to the PCC, and Mr Mayor, you and I have seen this so many times, that the PCC, if someone puts up and wants to put a building there of 30 stories, they will probably accept it. So at least this restricts it to around about the 15 mark. And if you may say that's too high, there is no way out of this unless you want to take a very much a lucky dip with the PCC. And the Planning Commission, in my opinion, would treat this very poorly from a perspective of the general public. So I think this is the best way. That's being pragmatic, and I think that's what matters. You just heard it from Councillor Davis, being pragmatic about what's going on. So I agree with Councillor Davis.
Councillor Ryan?
Yes, Your Worship, yeah. I'm in agreement with the motion, and I think 20, 25 years' time we might see something happen. So I'd agree with it today. I don't think I'll be alive when it happens, but that's my opinion anyway.
You're supporting it. Thank you. Back to the mover. I don't think I've covered everybody. I don't wish to speak any further. I've spoken long enough. Over to you, Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Nothing further to add aside from to note that as council we represent both community views and interests, both now and into the future, and so we have to weigh these decisions on a variety of different perspectives in the process. Thank you.
Very much. Just waiting for the vote to be open. The voting is now open. Please use the buttons on your microphone screen. Carried 5-3. Thank you very much. Didn't need it. Councillor. So it's carried 5 votes to 3. Thank you very much. We move to 12.2, final adoption. Is it 12.2? 12.2, final adoption amendment number 22 to local planning scheme number 15. Over to Councillor Kulczycki, I believe. Before I do that, I would like to advise in accordance with section 5.323(2)(b) of the Local Government Act 1905, Council will need to go behind closed doors if there are any questions on the confidential attachment for item 12.2. First of all, are there any questions before we progress? There are none. Councillor Kulczycki, if you could turn off your microphone for a second. And now I need a mover. Councillor Kulczycki, a seconder. Councillor Sessions. Over to you, Councillor Kulczycki.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'll be speaking in favour of the officer recommendation that's printed. So I speak in support of the officer recommendation for item 12.2, which will help ensure that development in the mixed-use zone aligns with its intended purpose. The mixed-use zone is designed to support a combination of complementary residential, commercial and retail uses. Warehouses do not belong in the setting. They add little to the local area and detract from the vision of a vibrant, well-planned community. Belmont has a distinct areas set aside for exclusive commercial and industrial land uses. Warehouses belong there. The development at 97 to 107 Great Eastern Highway in Rivervale is a clear example of why the scheme amendment is needed. Now that the site works have commenced, residents have expressed substantial concerns. The construction of a warehouse with limited local benefit reinforces the need for clearer planning controls. This scheme amendment cannot come soon enough to manage the very real risk of poor quality development being approved in the mixed zone use zone. Strengthening the planning provisions will help guide future development that better serves the community. Supporting this amendment will help maintain the integrity of the mixed-use zone and promote outcomes that align with the strategic planning objectives, including Council's recently endorsed Great Eastern Highway Urban Corridor Strategy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sessions.
Thanks, Mayor Rossi. Multiple residents contacted me about the National Storage Facility on the Great Eastern Highway in Rivervale. That's being built directly next to family houses, and none of them are happy. So I understand that that was a JDAP decision and Council didn't support it, but that makes this scheme amendment all the more important for future-proofing our mixed-use zones.
Thank you. Anybody else for or against? Councillor Marks, who's at the forefront with myself on JDAPs.
Yes, I was just going to say I'm a member of the JDAP there. Councillor Rossi and I voted against that particular building, and I must say that what you're going to see is a much improved building there, because originally it looked like a 1950s warehouse. The only thing amazed me there wasn't asbestos in it, Mayor Rossi, because it looked like it was being made out of asbestos, and really something that should have been in the industrial area, and that's where these should be, in the industrial area, even improved ones. This at least will look not completely out of place, but still it's a warehouse, and it's a warehouse on land that really should be reserved for decent, or buildings that are accessible to Perth, buildings that between the airport and Perth are of a lot of importance to everyone in Perth, not putting up warehouses. I think we must be the only city in the world where the land between the main CBD district and the airport is considered worthless, because that's the way they treat it. They put their buildings everywhere else, and warehouses is their idea, and fast food outlets and so forth is the main idea they have for Belmont and so forth along Great Eastern Highway. And it's just not good enough. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishes to speak on this? No, I'll just briefly say I also agree with this, and this is needed and timely. We need to protect this land for high quality development, but I believe that these sort of things like service stations are temporary, and that in 10, 15 years' time they will be redeveloped. It's just for income at the moment, I believe, but I think we need to protect it now. Thank you. We'll go back to the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to conclude by, again, thanking officers for their persistence with this scheme amendment, and also to acknowledge our council representatives on the JDAP, which obviously advocated on behalf of the community and this council's vision against that proposal, even though ultimately it was determined and approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Very much. Voting is now open. Please vote. Use the buttons on your microphone screen. There's one more vote to come, and it's Councillor Ryan. Maybe not pressing hard enough. Press gently this time. You got it. Terrific. Carried unanimously. 12.4, policy review, electoral caretaker period policy. I believe it's Councillor Sessions. I need a second. Anybody? We'll have to lapse. Councillor Kujitsky, you're next. Right, you're first. All right. Over to you, Councillor Sessions.
Thanks, Mayor Rossi. Can I please move a procedural motion to send this back to an IF?
The seconder agrees.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Sessions, before we vote. Do you wish to speak on this? No? Councillor Davis, you got a question? You can't speak on it.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
as to why? What
Definitely.
is the change in the caretaker period policy that requires this?
Councillor Sessions, there's a question there for you. Can you answer it?
Yeah, sure. Quite a few councillors have had a lot of questions about this. We also like to know the effectiveness of this policy because I think a lot of decisions are made by the Electoral Commission. So lots and lots of questions that I don't think have been answered. So I'd like it back at an IF.
We will now go to a vote. It's a procedural. Just waiting for the voting to. It's open. And who was it? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We move to 13, reports by Chief Executive Officer. Are there any leaves of absence? CEO? There's none. Notion of motion, there are none. Matters of which the meeting may be closed. I will now close the meeting in accordance with section 5.232C of the Local Government Act of 1995. May I have a move and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Davis, seconded by Councillor Harris. Now I'll do a vote. Voting is now open. Councillor Ryan again. Done. Terrific. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Would the IT officer please pause the live stream? With those in the public gallery who have already left now, thank you very much.
The live streaming is over.
I've already
Can we
asked
just,
it to be
sorry,
taken.
if we can just wait 1 moment.
Sorting some technical issues, so we're just waiting. Thanks for your patience. We need to move an adjournment because we need to sort out some technical issues just for 10 minutes. Could we have a move and a seconder, please? Move. Sorry, hold it. We've got it. We don't need to do it. 14.1, Centenary Park sports lighting upgrade, that council accepts the officer recommendation in relation to this item. Moved by Councillor Sessions, seconded by Councillor Davis, carried unanimously. 14.2, tender 22-2204, Wilson Park Precinct, Zone 2, Public Art Commission, that council accepts the officer recommendation in relation to this item. Moved by Councillor Kujitsky, seconded by Councillor Davis, carried unanimously. 14.3, that the Walga Sustainable Energy Project Phase 2 contract, that council accepts the officer recommendation in relation to this item. Moved by Councillor Sessions, seconded by Councillor Davis, carried unanimously. There being no further business to conduct, I thank all those in attendance and close the meeting at 9:11 p.m. I remind that all elected members to please return all confidential documents to the box in the foyer of the council's entrance here at the Civic Centre. Thank you, everyone, for a productive session. Thank you very much.